It's Sunday morning, the week before Christ's Mass. What is today's date? The 20th? Huh? This is December the 20th, and we're talking about Christ's Mass, Christmas. Christmas, I'm going to say some things I said last week. Christmas is the most evil thing that has happened in the history of the world. I want you to get a hold of what I'm saying. Christmas is the reason the World Trade Center came down. Christmas is the reason for all the terrorism in the world. World Trade Center, etc. Christmas is the reason for the economy crashing, with the United States on the verge of bankruptcy, on $18.5 trillion, with a commitment of $225 to $235 trillion. We can't pay off $18 trillion in the next 10,000 years. It's not possible. Christmas is the reason for the economy crashing. Christmas is the reason for all the disease in the world. Christmas is the reason that Adolf Hitler, the reason he killed 6 million Jews in World War II. Christmas is the reason for all of this. And Christmas is the reason for all the problems in the world. Christmas has brought about all the distorted gospel. You say, Jim, what do you mean Christmas? You mean December the 25th? No. December the 25th is merely the festival at the end of the year. At the end of the year, for the God of self that men worship all year long. What do you mean Christmas is the reason the World Trade Center came down? The reason the World Trade Center came down is because Israel came back into one nation after having been scattered all over the earth for 2,600 years. And the reason they were scattered all over the earth was because for a 500-year period, actually a 300-year period under Judges, 500 years under Kings, Israel kept going after Christmas under another name 3,500 years ago. Israel kept going after Christmas, or Baal and the Grove, and Shemash, and Molech, and Rimmon of the Syrians, and Isis, and Osiris, and all the gods of the nations around them. And these are all fire and sun god worship, sun and tree goddess worship. The females were worshipped as tree goddesses, and the male gods were worshipped as the sun god. And this is the same system that Constantine brought in the church and renamed the Christ Mass. So if this is the same thing, how could it be the cause of all of this? Well, Revelation 17:5, one of my favorite verses concerning the origin of all idolatry. The origin of all idolatry began at Babel. Babylon was the mother of all idolatry back in Genesis 11 and 4. You say, Jim, you put that on the board a lot. These two verses right here, nothing frightened me as bad as this verse connected with this verse right here. When I was 37, I was studying on where do you find Babylon in our society at the end of time. You find it wherever you find the character of Babylon, the mother of all idolatry. The word says harlotry, and the word is porneia. Porneia, which means, it's our word porn, which means idolatry. Idolatry means to serve what you see. Idolatry comes from ido, meaning to see, and latruo, meaning to serve. So all idolatry began back here in Genesis 11 and 4. I pondered on that and pondered on it. Babylon mothered it all. All you have to do is go back to the first dynasty of Babylon in Genesis 11, and everything in the world is founded, that's evil, was founded on let us make us a name. Let us make us a name. Name, of course, is the word Shem. It means authority. So they made up, Nimrod and his descendants made up this system of fire and tree worship, and wherever you find any gods, which would be the god of self, anywhere you find it, it's going to be the same thing that Constantine brought in the church and renamed the Christ Mass. And why did he do that? He did that because he was about to lose the empire. For about 200 years prior to Constantine, Constantine overthrew Maxentius, who was head of the Western Empire. If this were the boot of Italy, then you have, over here you have you have Greece. That's not exactly the way it's drawn, but that'll be good enough. And then you have over here, you have Turkey or Asia Minor. And in Asia, you had Constantinople. Then over here, you had Rome. Well, Constantine attacked Rome and overthrew Maxentius, who was the emperor of Rome at that time. They had two Caesars. Well, he overthrows Rome, becomes leader of all the civilized world, but he had a fear of losing the empire to all of these northern tribes that were barbarians. If you see the barbarian series, you say, Jim, you said that before. If you see the barbarian series, I brought a book with me. Did I leave it over there? I think I left it in here. Yeah. No. Well, I thought I brought it. Oh, here it is. This is a great book to get if you can get one. It's a Time Life series, and in the front of the book, this will show you with a picture what Christmas is about. Right here is actually the picture of where Christmas comes from, because all of this darker area here, that was the Roman Empire that Constantine was ruling. You see all this gray area up here? All that gray area was a bunch of heathen barbarians. And when you get up real close to it, you see the Scythians and the Samaritans, and they're in pink. It shows them coming from the Far East over here, and it shows the Celts in that orange. The Celts are coming from over here in the Far East, and it shows the Huns in a deeper orange, the Huns coming from over here, and they also come from the Far East. And the Visigoths, and the Ostrogoths, and the Vandals, and the Franks, and the Angles, and the Saxons, and the Vikings, they were rampaging across the European continent, and Constantine was afraid of losing the empire. He said, we're going to lose it. It wasn't just Constantine. For about 200 years, all the Caesars thought, we're going to lose the empire. We got to do something. Constantine was the first one to step forward and hit the ball and say, let's do something about it. We will bring all of the gods of these pagans, and they all had to be fire and tree worshipers. How do you know that? Babylon mothered it all. And when you go into studying any of these gods and goddesses, you'll find that they're fire and tree worshipers. So they're the same thing that was brought into Israel by Israel. When Ahab marries Jezebel, her father was Ethbaal, and he was the priest of the Ashtaroth and a priest of Baal. And he was just above Israel in what's called Tyre and Sidon. Well, he was a priest of the Baal worship of Babylon down here on the Euphrates River. It had migrated over here through Mr. Ethbaal, and then it's married down into Israel by I'll get it right in a minute. It's married into Israel when Ahab marries Jezebel. Brings their gods down in that 16th chapter of 1 Kings. I would like to have a copy of this so I could give it to everybody. This is the reason for Christmas. It was all about money and power brought into the church. Well, let me show you something that I didn't finish. I hadn't finished. All right. This is the reason when Israel was scattered all over the world, and when they came back, May 14, 1948, became a nation, the Arab world declared war against them and declared war against us. But before I get further into that, let me show you how you can trace the, if this were Israel, right here, on the eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea. I'm going to show you one more time how you can trace Israel to America, how you can trace the same gods that Israel was involved in, Baal and the Grove and Shemash and Molech, and all the gods of all the people around them, how you can trace it to America. Well, Jezebel marries Ahab, and her father was the prince of Tyre. And there were two places in the world that propagated this sun and tree worship more than anywhere else. That was Tyre and Sidon and Babylon on the Euphrates River. And we know that Babylon mothered it all. Therefore, if Babylon mothered it all, then Ethbaal, the father of Jezebel, Ethbaal means with Baal, Ethbaal had to get his system from Babylon. Right? He had to get his system from over here. Well, when you have four empires that rule the ancient world. You have Babylon, and Babylon begins in Genesis 11, and there were many dynasties of a Babylonian system. You had somebody there say there were 16, 18, some say there are 20 and 30. We don't know exactly how many dynasties there were, but we know the first one was in Genesis 11. Well, when the Persian Empire overthrows Babylon, Persia is over here in Iran, what we call Iran. And Babylon is on the Euphrates River with these great big huge walls that are nearly about 380 feet high. And they got the river running around it and the river running through it. And it straddles the Euphrates River with a 7-tier bridge going across the river where they can walk back and forth. Well, they said, we can't be conquered. You can't conquer us. We're too big. We're too fortified. Well, the only problem was when Cyrus, the Persian king, now you can get this out of Isaiah 44 and 45, the last few verses of 44 and the first few verses of 45, and you can get this same event out of Herodotus. Herodotus was the father of all history, of historians. I've got Herodotus' 2 volumes. You can get how that the king of Persia is the same thing as Iran. Well, in fact, Persia includes Afghanistan and Pakistan, and some of the other stands like Turkestan, and it goes all the way over to India. Now, when Cyrus comes in, according to Herodotus and Isaiah 44 and 45, he does something nobody ever thought of doing to conquer Babylon. He comes up north of Babylon, diverts the river, dams it up, and diverts the river out into the Arabian desert. You got millions of square miles of desert. You can dump all the water you want to out of the Euphrates into the desert and it won't affect it. Well, he diverts it down here, and then he marches down the riverbed according to Isaiah 44 and 45 and comes up to it says 2 leaved gates. That's what the first few verses of Isaiah, the 45th chapter, say. And Herodotus tells you the same thing. He comes up to these 2 leaved gates. They were great big huge gates that opened up so the women could go down to the river and wash their clothes and do whatever they needed to do. So he comes up to 2 leaved gates, comes in, and he sees Belshazzar parting with the vessels of the house of the Lord. You got not just Isaiah 44 and 45, you've got this same account in different words in Isaiah 13 and Isaiah 14, and then you have the same account in Daniel, the 5th chapter, where Belshazzar sees the handwriting on the wall, and then you also have in Jeremiah 50th and the 51st chapter. All of these chapters here are about the fall of Babylon at the hands of the Persian kings. So when Cyrus comes in and takes over Babylon, and you've got, it looks like some pretty good guys ruling the Persian Empire. You got Cyrus, who gives a decree. He's actually called the Anointed of the Lord because he gives a decree for Israel in 538 BC. He overthrows Babylon in 539 BC. And of course, Babylon has overthrown Israel in 586 BC. And then she don't last much long after that until 539. And in 538, Cyrus gives a decree for Israel to go back and rebuild their temple that has been destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar in 586, by Neb. I'll just put Neb there, in 586. He does something else. He outlaws the fire worship system. And the Chaldeans, which are the Chaldeans, they are the Magi. Now you had good Magi and you had bad Magi. Magi is the word wise men there in Matthew the 2nd chapter when they come to find out where the king of the Jews is born. Well, you had some evil Magi, and you have the word magic. Magic means the science of the Magi. Well, they mastered sleight of hand, and they pretended that their sleight of hand, their magicianry, they pretended that was, that they were actually performing this. Well, the Chaldeans are driven out, and they find their seat in Pergamus. Now, the king of Pergamus was a man, at the time of their fall, was a man named Attalus III. Now, when Attalus III dies, let's look at Pergamus over here in Revelation. Revelation, the 2nd chapter. Now, historically, this is where the fire worship system moved to. In Pergamus, they worshipped Asclepius. They had a fire god there, just like they had everywhere. Fire god. And everywhere they had a fire god or a goddess, they kept the flames going. In fact, when this moved down into Israel, they kept the fires of Tophet burning 24 hours a day. Tophet was just southeast of Jerusalem, and Israel would go down to Tophet, and they would offer their children in the fire. The place was called Tophet. The god they offered their children to was Molech, or Moloch, a variation of the same name, Moloch. And they would offer their children in the fire on the Sabbath, then go back to Jerusalem and offer a sacrifice to Jehovah God on the same day, according to the 23rd chapter of Ezekiel. So they would go back and offer their fire. So you can trace the gods of Israel. Finally, it bled down into southern Judah. When Ahab marries Jezebel, he brings her gods into northern Israel there in 1 Kings, the 16th chapter. And God kept telling Israel, if you go after other gods, I'll send the sword, the famine, the pestilence, and finally I will send the beast. The beast was Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. There was Babylon, Persia, then Greece. And the Babylonian lion, the reason it was called the beast, the Persian bear, and the Grecian leopard, and the beast with iron teeth. That was Rome. That was Rome. All right. Now, so you got Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and Israel keeping their fires burning eternally. You can find that in Isaiah, the 30th chapter, and you can find it throughout in Jeremiah, the 19th chapter. You can find them going down to Tophet and burning their children in the fire. And God says, when you do this, I'll make you eat your children. That'll be famine. The sword will be people coming against Israel for this. And the pestilence will be all kinds of disease. No rain would be a pestilence, because along with starvation comes disease. And the sword would be, what I said earlier, would be terrorism. The reason for Christmas is the reason for terrorism. It's the reason Hitler killed 6 million Jews, excuse me. It's the reason the World Trade Center came down. That's war. Terrorism is war. It's the reason for the economy going down. That is famine. It's the reason for the disease in the world, for all of the plagues, for all of the hurricanes. You can believe that this is not going to stop. None of it's going to stop in the world. People say, what's so bad about Christmas? Well, do you like the economy collapsing on you? Is that bad? Do you like the World Trade Center being crashed into? That's one of the things really bad about Christmas. You like the terrorism out there in California and in Paris and everywhere else that's rising up, and everywhere that the Syrians, particularly Assad Sr. used to order all of these back in the 60s and 70s. He was ordering all these restaurants blown up. The reason for all of that is Israel went after Christmas under another name. I've got a book. I got a book here. And I showed it to you last week. Right here. And the guy that wrote this, he's not writing it for the same reason I'm preaching against it. 4,000 years of Christmas. Now, Jesus lived 2,000 years ago, right? How can 4,000 years of Christmas be right? He's writing it to say, here's Christmas began 4,000 years ago, and here's some real nice, sweet, pagan things you can do during Christmas to have a good time. That's more or less what he's saying. But he said it began all that long ago. Let me just read a couple of things out of here. Where was I going in my Bible?
Revelation 2.
Huh?
Revelation 2? Revelation 2?
No. Did I say Revelation 2?
Yeah.
Lord, I have forgotten where I was going already. Pergamus, that's right, Pergamus. Pergamus. All right, I'll read some out of this 4,000 Years of Christmas in a minute. Look, go to Revelation, the 2nd chapter. Revelation 2 and 3 is about the 7 churches of Asia. Each one of them had a problem, a fault in them that needed to be corrected. Here, and you go through the church of Ephesus. You've left your first love. And then you go into Smyrna, some of the synagogue of Satan. I'm not going to take time to go on that. That's a long study. Then you get to the 3rd church, which is Pergamus. And he says in verse 11, He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. He that overcometh, remember overcome, Nikao, is the verb form of faith, which is the word Nike. He that overcometh. I got my finger on too many places. All right. He that overcometh. Anytime you see overcome, it's always the verb form of Nike. Nike is the word victory. That's a noun. Noun. The verb form is Nikao. Nikao is the word overcome. And the scripture tells us in the 5th chapter, 1 John, faith is the Nike, the victory that overcomes the world. Faith is death to self. So faith, pistis, is the Nike that overcomes the world. But let's go ahead and read here. And to the angel of the church in Pergamus write, These things saith he which hath the sharp sword with 2 edges. You'll find that in the 1st chapter of Revelation. You see a sharp sword coming out of his mouth, 2-edged sword in verse 16. You see the same thing in the 19th chapter of Revelation coming out the mouth of Christ. That's the Word of God. Verse 13 of chapter 2, I know thy works, Pergamus, where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is. This is the church. Pergamus is located in Turkey, somewhere about where my finger is. Somewhere in that neighborhood right there. That's Pergamus. It was driven out, the fire worship was driven out to Pergamus. How did it get to Rome? And how did it get to America? Now, let me finish reading here. I know thy works, where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is, thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my faith. And in those days wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, we don't know who that Antipas was. It was a man at Pergamus who died in the faith, who was slain among you where Satan dwelleth. And the historians will tell us, Mr. Hislop will tell us, even Matthew Poole and Matthew Henry will tell us, they're in agreement, that this is where the system of idolatry moved to. How did it get in the Roman Catholic Church? All right, so it moved to here. When Attalus III died, now Mr. Hislop will tell you that in his book, The Two Babylons. When he died, the Romans over here, you're over here at Rome, they loved this magic of the Chaldeans, and they had become very familiar with it. So when Attalus III died, he left all of his system to Rome by will and testament. So you get over here to Rome, the boot of Italy, over here. They leave it to Rome. They worshipped A-U-S-C-A-E, A-E-S, excuse me. A-E-S-C-A-P-U-L-I-U-S. Asclepius. Asclepius was the serpent god over here. The first time we see the heads behind the sun god, which is the halo, behind the heads of anyone. According to the scholars, it's behind the head of the serpent god, a cobra god, over here in Pergamus. Well, they take this torch and they keep the fires burning permanently in Pergamus, just like they kept burning permanently in Babylon, the same way they kept them burning permanently over here in Tyre. And it was fires that were never quenched. And they kept it burning down here, south of Jerusalem in Tophet. And Isaiah, the 30th chapter, the Bible says, the fires of Tophet are kindled by the breath of God. Look at that quickly over here. Isaiah 30. I said this last week, that all of these things that's happening in the world, if you don't mind World Trade Center coming down and more terrorism, then keep doing Christmas. It's not just the day at the end of the year, it's the God of self that men serve all year long. They serve it all year long. It's the God of let us make us a name. And they just have a holiday at the end of the year. Christmas, when you call it what it was the feast of Saturn in Rome, and it was all about food. It was all about having their crops come back. I've said so many times, it's about the Big Dipper. That's what it is. It's the Big Dipper in its 4 phases. 4 phases. And it is the swastika. That's all it is. And that's called the Wheel of the Year. They looked at it in early June, in the summer. And they looked at it, the Big Dipper at midnight, in the summer, and then in the fall, it was here. And then at midnight, it was down here in the winter, and it was here in the spring, right here. And putting together in the 4 seasons, you have the swastika, or the Wheel of the Year. It was the worship of the Big Dipper. They wanted to get through the real hard winter, get back to spring. It was all about crops. Everything of this fire and tree worship is about crops. It's about distributing fortunes. Distributing fortunes. That's the word demon, daimonion, in the Greek. And they called their gods by the term of daimonion. Now, over here in the 30th chapter of Isaiah, look at verse 33. For Tophet, which was in the valley of Hinnom on the eastern part of Jerusalem, south of Jerusalem, Tophet is ordained of old, yea, for the king is prepared, he hath made it deep and large, the pile thereof is fire and much wood, the breath of the Lord like a stream of brimstone doth kindle it. Now, so that's Tophet, where they offer their children. In fact, look at Jeremiah, the 19th chapter. Jeremiah 19, verse 1, Thus saith the Lord, Go and get a potter's earthen bottle, and take of the ancients of the people and the ancients of the priests, and go forth into the valley of the son of Hinnom, that is by the entry of the east gate. The east gate would be southeast of Jerusalem, going to Hinnom. And we get the word Gehenna, one of the terms for hell, from valley of the sons of Hinnom. Valley of the sons of Hinnom. Now, by the entry of the east gate, that's very important, because southeast of Jerusalem was Tophet, where they burned their children in the fire. And some of the writers tell us that Tophet comes from the word toph, which means drum. And they said they drummed the drum so loud to drown out the children screaming and yelling and gnashing their teeth while they're being burnt in the fire. Toph is the word drum. So they couldn't hear the screaming of their children. Jeremiah 19, and say, hear ye the word of the Lord, O kings of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will bring evil upon this place, upon Tophet in Gehenna, the which whosoever heareth his ears will tingle, because Israel hath forsaken me, and has estranged this place, and have burned incense in it unto other gods, whom neither they nor their fathers have known, nor the kings of Judah, and have filled this place with the blood of innocents. Now that word innocent means all charges are dropped to the ground. It means these are guiltless babies. They're innocent. That's why this is another proof that babies don't go to hell. They have built also the high places of Baal, burn their sons with fire for burnt offerings unto Baal, which I commanded not, neither spake it, neither came into my mind. A lot of people say, see, God didn't want them to do this. Well, he did. When he said it didn't come to my mind, what he's saying, when I told Israel, I want your firstborns, you have to buy them back, because I have substituted, instead of Reuben, who was unstable as water, the firstborn of Jacob, I have appointed the thirdborn, Levi, to be the priesthood, which should have gone to Reuben, and I have appointed Judah, the fourthborn of Jacob, the fourthborn, to be the king. Out of that would come the king. And when I said, buy back your firstborns, I mean substitute an offering for them. I'm not talking about offer them in the fires to Molech. That's not what I had in mind when I said, buy back your firstborns. So therefore, behold the days come, saith the Lord, that this place shall no more be called Tophet, nor the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter, when I bring in the Babylonians to come in and slaughter you there. I will make void the counsel of Judah and Jerusalem in this place, and I will cause them to fall by the sword before their enemies. There's one of the judgments of God. Sword, famine, pestilence. God speaks of his four judgments, four sword judgments over there in Ezekiel, the 14th chapter. And by the hands of them that seek their lives, and their carcasses will I give to be meat for the fowls of the heaven and for the beasts of the earth, and I will make this city desolate and in hissing. Hissing means to jeer at or make fun of. Every one that passeth thereby shall be astonished and hiss, because all the plagues thereof. And I will cause Israel to eat the flesh of their sons and the flesh of their daughters. I'll cause them to be cannibals. When I put them in a siege by their enemies, and they don't have any food for a month, and their children start dying, I'll cause them to eat their own children. And they shall eat every one the flesh of his friend in the siege and straitness, wherewith their enemies and they that seek their lives shall straiten them. Now, that shows you a little bit about Tophet, where Israel. Let me read a little to you out of this 4,000 years of Christmas. This guy is not even putting it down. He's just telling you about the nice, fun things you can do at Christmas. And he starts off his book by saying, I had no idea how varied, rich, and ancient our heritage of Christmas was until I read this gem of a book. Evidently, he put the forward in this book. Nor did I imagine that familiar practices performed in a small frame house where I grew up in the 1940s also had origins in Babylonian festivals and Roman revels. The survival of customs from such diverse times and cultures throughout history seemed to me to be a powerful treatment to the universality of the human experience. It suggests that we are not only brothers and sisters under the skin, but also in time and space. He's saying he's a brother to all those people involved in that. Well, I'm not. 2,000 years before Christ, in the land where the Tigris and Euphrates meet, people felt the weight of the old year as it drew to a close and needed a sense of renewal to face the new one, just as we do today. That was when they got to the winter solstice, the longest nights of the year, and that was December the 21st, and the appointed birthday for the unconquerable sun, thinking it was burning out on December the 25th. And then he says, the men surreptitiously gathered in the kitchen where my father would draw a pint of bourbon from its hiding place in the broom closet and pass it around to each one for a nip and a sigh of satisfied warmth. And he goes into this further. That must have been our mild Hoosier version of the Roman Saturnalia, the pagan revels of the excess that marked that time of the year. Like these Romans, also decorated with green boughs to remind us of life's continuance, and lit lamps and candles as they did against the dark. The wish to bring light to the dark gave hope of spring in the dead of winter. Lighting the candles for Hanukkah every December symbolizes such longing in the Jewish faith. See, he doesn't even know what that's about. Hanukkah stands exact opposition to Christmas. Hanukkah, well, I got to finish this up here. Hanukkah was when Judas Maccabeus liberated Israel from Antiochus Epiphanes. Antiochus, when he's going to attack Egypt, and Antiochus in Syria, he's going to attack Egypt. He comes down to attack Egypt, but Rome sends an emissary to the island of Cyprus and tells Antiochus, you have to meet us here on Cyprus. And of course they fear the Romans, so he meets him here on Cyprus. This Roman emissary draws a circle around Antiochus, says, don't you step out of that circle until you promise you will not attack Egypt. Of course, he is just chomping at the bits, but Syria is not able to take on Rome. So he says, okay, I promise. And he comes back to Jerusalem, desecrates the temple by raising up an Ashtaroth in the temple. An Ashtaroth is a tree goddess, or a Christmas tree. And that was around 166 BC. And then in 164 BC, during what's called the Hasmonean dynasty, that is the family of Judas Maccabeus, that's called Between the Testaments. Between the Testaments is a good book to have. It's in the Apocrypha. You can't accept the things in the Apocrypha as Holy Writ, but you can't accept it as history. So in 164 BC, Judas Maccabeus, he and his brothers, he was the head of the family, Maccabeus. Judas Maccabeus attacks Antiochus, who is controlling Jerusalem, the temple, drives him out, cleanses the temple of all sun and tree worship, and calls this the Festival of Lights, or Hanukkah. And that is where he throws Christmas out of the temple at Hanukkah. Throws out the tree, throws out the fire worship. That's what Hanukkah is. It's not, amazes me. And he does that on the birthday of their sun god, December the 25th. That's when Judas throws out Christmas on their on Holy Day. That's amazing. Everybody wants to identify Christmas and Hanukkah together. They're opposites. Hanukkah is cleansing the temple of all of this heathenism. Sometimes it's spelled CH Hanukkah. 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 Probably Hanukkah. That's put that growling sound. All right. Now, let me read a little more of this here. The rules of ordinary living were relaxed. No, we'd already read that. And it's amazing what they say. A pagan god of Germans merged to become Santa Claus. No, not a... See, that's how uninformed he is. He's trying to make it all sound good. Santa Claus was Sinterklaas in the Netherlands, or Saint Nicholas. Saint Nicholas was a 4th century Roman Catholic bishop, and he kept toys for children all year round. Some believe that he was a pedophile. Although Christmas story centers in the Christ child of Bethlehem, it be again long before Christ's coming that we find its hero arriving on the scene after more than half of the time of the story has gone by. Christmas is one of mankind's great experiences. For more than 4,000 years, spreading over the earth, it has drawn the loyalties and longings of millions of people, growing always richer as humankind has matured. What then shall we liken Christmas? And he goes into all of this planting and so forth. Yet to what can we really like anything that is living and growing and changing except to itself? It will tell us of an old Babylonian festival that moves westward, dividing its ways as it comes through Greece into Rome, as a festival that remodels itself at every step to fit the people among whom it settles. And then on over here, it's got a section. It's called, the rising of the sun goes west, and then it's got a chapter on the Saturnalia. He's acting like this is a nice, fun way to do your Christmas. The figures in the drama, speaking of the Saturnalia, changed, the incidents also, but the plot remained. In ancient Babylonia, it was Marduk, M-A-R-D-U-K. This was the chief god of Babylon over here on the Euphrates River 2,000 years before Jesus. Marduk, who conquered the monsters that lived before our world was created in Greece. It was Zeus who fought and overcame Kronos, or the Titans. It's really, Kronos and the Titans were evil. The Titans were the sons of the gods. I don't know why they got the Nashville Titans down here, but they do. But the Titans were the evil gods, and it certainly appears to be that what they attributed to the sap going down in the vine was the evil gods, which was Kronos, or it was Pluto. These were evil gods, or it was Hades. And the good gods was Hercules and Perseus, and these guys who were going to go into the underworld and conquer the gods so they could bring them crops in the spring. It's nothing but darkness as opposed to light. And Paul tells the Ephesians, you were darkness, but now you're light in the Lord, walk as children of light. And boy, I can talk all day on that. Talking about Marduk, the Romans believed in an ancient god of seed time, which was Saturn, who had ruled their country ages before their own day. The first day of the Saturnalia shifted during the lifetime of Rome. At all events, it began around the middle of December with the cry, Lo Saturnalia! They'd go around yelling that to each other. December the 25th, the day as the Romans calculated when the sun was at its lowest ebb. The Roman Saturnalia and the holidays that followed were boisterous indeed, judging by what the Christian thought of them, and it goes on and on. When Saturnalia arrived, the soldiers there chose by lot among their number to be the Saturnine king of revel. For 30 days they feasted this man, indulged him in all the things, paid him rough and boisterous court. Then when his 30 days were up, he had to stand at the altar and kill himself. Now, I don't know why anybody wants to be the king of the Saturnalia. It was the same thing as the king of Mardi Gras. He would be killed at the end of that. In 303 A.D., the lot fell upon Decius, who refused to play the pagan god for the amusement of his heathen comrades. And it goes on further. I can't read all this. That's just a... And he's talking about, isn't this colorful, all of our background? He's not even really condemning it. He's just telling you about 4,000 years of Christmas. So let me finish up. How did this get over to America? How did it get in Roman Catholicism? All right, let me erase some of this here. Well, here's how it got over there. When Attalus III died, he was the king of this system. He left his system. Now this would be Africa down here, or Carthage right here, and African continent down here. When he died, he left this eternal flame in the temple of Asclepius, the serpent god. He left it all to Rome. They had an Olympic runner that took the torch, lit the torch from the flame in the temple of Asclepius, and ran it over here. Now you got the Aegean Sea here, and then you got Greece here, and you've got a land bridge here. Somehow they came across the land. There may have been it's a little canal that goes up into the Black Sea here, but somehow they ran it over, probably put it on a boat, and the guy's holding the torch, bringing it over here to Rome, and he lights the fires in the temple of Mithra with this flame, this eternal flame, which was brought from Babylon. From Babylon, it's taken over to Tyre and Sidon, married down into Israel by Ahab. Then Ahab and Jezebel's daughter marries Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, mainly because Jehoshaphat, a righteous king, is running around with Ahab, gets it down into Israel. You can trace it over here to Babylon, up to Pergamus, over to Rome, and then how does it end up in the Roman Catholic Church when it's pagan right here? How does it end in Roman Catholicism? There are two Caesars. You can get this out of the way you find out, if you got the two Babylons, or if you've got Matthew Poole's commentaries, Matthew Henry's commentaries. They'll both tell you what happened. There were two Caesars, Numa and Gratian. They said, we will not wear the robes of the Pontifex Maximus. That is what the head of the fire worship, the high priest, Pontifex Maximus. That means maximum, supreme, high priest. They wouldn't wear the robes of the Pontifex Maximus. So Gratian says image worship will be outlawed. Numa, this Caesar, Numa, goes along with that at a later date. Let me read some of this. This is out of, I've literally worn this copy of my two Babylons out. I've got another one at home. You can see I mark it up considerably. Every page is marked up like this. And this will tell you how this came about. I'm going to read it to you because I can't put it in words better than Mr. Hislop. As Christianity spread in the Roman Empire, the powers of light and darkness came into collision. Michael and the angels fought against the dragon, and so forth. The great serpent of fire was cast out when, by the decree of Gratian, paganism throughout the Roman Empire was abolished. When the fires of Vesta, the Vestal Virgin, which were the predecessors to the nuns, when they brought this to the temple of Mithra, his birthday was December the 25th, the Vestal Virgins, one of their duties, these were the servants, the female servants, which were predecessors to the nuns. One of their big jobs was keep the fires burning continually in the temple of Mithra. If they let it go out, it was a severe penalty to a Vestal Virgin. Let me read this. It was cast out by Gratian, paganism, and Matthew Poole and Matthew Henry will say the same thing that Hislop is saying here. When they outlawed this, they did away with one of the capital cities or one of the heads. They will tell you this was the deadly wound of one of the 7 heads of the beast. A head was a capital city of an empire, capital city, and one of the heads was wounded to death in Romans and Revelation, the 13th chapter. They'll tell you that all 3 of these men, Poole, Henry, and Hislop, will tell you that the deadly one that was healed was one of the heads died. It would be the death of the pagan Roman Empire, the pagan Roman Empire, and the reinstitution of that same head in Rome in the form of Roman Catholicism. What they did, they simply attributed they said this was the deadly wound that was healed coming back to life.
You put wound.
Huh?
Deadly.
Huh?
You didn't put wound.
Deadly wound, not deadly wood. Deadly wound was healed. And it was healed in the form of the Roman Empire. Roman Empire, what they did, they took Jupiter, and they attributed to Jupiter, they called him Peter, and they kept all of the niches in the pagan Roman Empire. A niche is a little grotto. It's when you're walking along, if you're walking along this hallway and you see a little niche, go down here and you see a little niche. It's like an indention in the wall where they got a statue there that you worship, stop and worship that god. Well, they called Jupiter Peter, and they called Venus or Aphrodite or Mylitta, and it bled through all of the different cultures. These were called Queen of Heaven, and all the ancient female deities in the ancient pagan world were called Queen of Heaven. If you want to know more about the Queen of Heaven, take your McClintock and Strong and look up Queen of Heaven. The Queen of Heaven is the Mary of Roman Catholicism. They said that the Queen of Heaven had to be turning that wheel of the year, or the swastika or the Big Dipper, in order to get back to spring. They said it was the Queen of Heaven. Well, the Queen of Heaven, Israel is condemned for worshiping the Queen of Heaven in Jeremiah 44 and Jeremiah the 7th chapter. Israel, they said, we will not do what you say, Jeremiah. We will offer incense to the Queen of Heaven if we want to. Don't tell us what to do. Let me read some more of this. When the fires of Vesta were extinguished, the revenues of the Vestal Virgins were confiscated when the Roman emperor, who though for more than a century and a half a professor of Christianity, had been Pontifex Maximus, the very head of the idolatry of Rome. That was the term for the Caesars who were head of the Roman idolatry. And as such, on high occasions, appearing invested with all idolatrous insignia of paganism, through force of conscience abolished his office. While Nimrod was personally and literally slain by the sword, it was through the sword of the Spirit that Shem overcame the system of fire worship, and so bowed the hearts of men as to cause it for a time to be utterly extinguished. In like manner did the dragon of fire in the Roman Empire receive a deadly wound from a sword, and at the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, there is thus far an exact analogy between the type and the antitype. But not only is there this analogy, it turns out when the records of history are searched to the bottom, that when the head of the pagan idolatry of Rome was slain with the sword by the extinction of the office of Pontifex Maximus, when Gratian and Numa outlawed it, the last Roman Pontifex Maximus was the actual legitimate sole representative of Nimrod and his idolatrous system then existing. To make this clear, a brief glance at the Roman history is necessary. In common with all the earth, Rome at a very early prehistoric period had drunk deep of Babylon's golden cup. But above and beyond all other nations, it had been a connection with idolatry of Babylon that put it in a position peculiar and alone. Long before the days of Romulus and Remus were supposed to be the originators of the city of Rome, supposed to have been raised by wolves, if you remember the story. Long before the days of Romulus, a representative of the Babylonian Messiah, called by his name, had fixed his temple as a god and his palace as a king on one of those very heights which came to be included within the walls of that city which Remus and his brother were destined to found on the Capitoline Hill, so famed in after days as the great place of Roman worship, Saturnalia, or the city of Saturn. The great Chaldean god had in the days of dim and distant antiquity been erected. Some revolution had then taken place. The graven images of Babylon had been abolished. The erecting of any idol had been sternly prohibited. And when the twin founders of the now world-renowned city reared its humble walls, the city and the palace of their Babylonian predecessor had long laid in ruins. The deadly wound, however, thus given to the Chaldean system, was destined to be healed in the form of Roman Catholicism. A colony of Etruscans, which is what they called the Chaldeans when they moved up here to Pergamus, and the Romans loved the Etruscans. A colony of Etruscans earnestly attacked the Chaldean idolatry, had migrated, some say, from Asia Minor, others from Greece, settled in the immediate neighborhood of Rome. They were ultimately incorporated in the Roman state, but long before this political union took place, they exercised the most powerful influence on the religion of the Romans from the very first. Their skill in augury was their trickery, their sleight of hand, soothsaying, and all science, real or pretended, that the augurs or soothsayers monopolized, made the Romans look up to their respect. So they're outlawing this, and I've got several pages on this. I can't even read it all. I would like to read all this page and this page, but if you've got it, 2 Babylons, you can read that on page 240. You can read the rest of it. What happened? They outlawed this system, reinstituted it in the form of Roman Catholicism. That is, Mr. Poole is in agreement with that. So is Matthew Henry, along with Mr. Hislop. I believe that's exactly what it's saying. Look over here. Look over here in Revelation 13. Revelation 13. Here in verse 1, I stood on the sand of the sea. It's always talking about the Mediterranean Sea. Stood on the sands of the Mediterranean Sea. All of the Roman, Babylonian, Persian, Grecian, Roman Empire had their borders on the sea. So whenever you see the sea, that's what it's talking about. That's where all civilization was. There was no America. There was no South America. There wasn't anything except the Mediterranean. That was their civilization. Now here in 13. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns 10 crowns. What are the crowns for? The crowns show authority. It, like King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Well, this beast system is calling itself the Kings of Kings, with all these crowns. And upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, that's Greece. And his feet is the feet of a bear, that's Persia. And his mouth is the mouth of a lion, that's Babylon. There in Daniel, the 7th chapter. And the dragon gave it, not him, it, A-U-T-O-U, A-U-T-O-U. It has to follow the gender of the antecedent. The antecedent is the noun or pronoun it refers back to. It refers back to Totherion, the beast, and that is neuter gender. So it's not he, it's its. That's the way it even says it in the Interlinear Bible. Gave it its power, its seat, and its great authority, and I saw one of its heads wounded to death. Well, a head was a capital city, and when you look over here in Revelation 17, in verse 9, and here's a marriage which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Well, a head being a capital city, it speaks of, in fact, if you back up to verse 8, in chapter 17, the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, or the place of no knowledge, and go into perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not, and yet is. It is not because one of the heads is wounded to death, and then it is. It resurrects. When you go down here into verse 10 of chapter 17, there are 7 kings, or 7 world systems. The word king, basileus, is also a form of the word meaning to reign or kingdom. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen. The 7 kings are the 7 heads, are the 7 mountains. 5 are fallen, and 1 is. John wrote this in 96 AD, I believe that. 96 AD. Rome was ruling then. But the Roman Catholic Church doesn't come about until 325 AD. 325. So one of the heads would be the Roman Empire, and the head before that would be, and who was ruling before Rome? Greece. And where did they keep their capital city? In Babylon. And who ruled before Babylon? Persia. Persia. And Cyrus said, I love this city of Babylon. I'm going to keep the capital city in Babylon. So there's another head. And then before Persia was Babylon. And Babylon, I'll get it right in a minute. Babylon's head was in the city of Babylon. And that is 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is 5 are fallen. 5 are fallen. So you're going to have, now, I can't say I'm absolutely sure, but whatever the capital city is of the beast world system, that would be the head. The one that was wounded to death was the pagan Roman Empire. And that's the one that is when John is writing this book. That's the one that is. Later on, you'll have Roman Catholicism, and this is the one that is to come. Well, you got one is, 5 are fallen, 1, 2, 3. Babel would be another one. And when you look up city, it means a congregation of people. I'm not positive what the first head is, but I believe it would be Garden of Eden. When they took it on themselves to make themselves a name, when Adam and Eve, when you look at a city, it means a congregation of people that can come together and vote. They had a government of Adam, by Eve, and for the devil. Now, this is something that I perceive to be the 7 heads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are fallen, and one is, and the other's not yet come. Roman Catholicism is not yet come. Now, where was I? So, let me get back to this over here. How did this get to America? When they outlawed Roman Catholicism, they outlawed the pagan Roman Empire. They reformed it into the form of Roman Catholicism, and they send an edict out all over the world. Rome, destroy everything that's not Christian, and what they call Christian was Roman Catholicism. I went through this last week. I don't know if I've got much time to get into it. So it comes to America. When the Puritans come to America, the Puritans had been slaughtered by the Roman Catholic Church all over Europe. The Roman Catholics came out with something called the Doctrine of Discovery. I'll tell you what you do. You go online, look up Doctrine of Discovery. Doctrine of Discovery. Roman Catholics in 1452, under Pope Nicholas V, they put out this Doctrine of Discovery. They said that anyone who goes into a land that's not inhabited by Christians, which is what they called Roman Catholics, that you had a right to lay claim to that land in this Doctrine of Discovery. I put in quotations, discovery. And they say that the land is not inhabited when it's inhabited by American Indians, since American Indians were not human beings and they had no souls. The same thing was said about the blacks during slavery times, and the same thing about Mexicans. They don't matter, we will take their land if we want to. Roman Catholicism says they have a right to assume ownership of a land. When Columbus came to America, Columbus was a Roman Catholic. I said it last week. He was a Roman Catholic. And where did he get his commission to come to America? From a Roman Catholic court, Ferdinand and Isabel of Spain. And they had been putting out this edict. The man who shored this edict up in 1492, the same year that Columbus supposedly discovered America, he actually landed at San Salvador, south of the United States. In 1492, Pope Alexander the Fourth. The popes take on a new name He took on the name Pope Alexander. He was actually Rodrigo Borgia. When you say Borgia in history, you say the lowest, sleaziest pope that ever lived. I don't know that he's the worst. He just openly had several women. He had about 4 women that were having babies by him. He raised his babies and put them in position in the Roman Catholic Church, made them cardinals, and the whole thing. Made one of his sons a cardinal when he was 25 years old. Now, what does a 25-year-old know about being a cardinal? About the same thing that George Armstrong Custer knew about being a general when he's made a general at 25. Nothing.
I was just going to say Joel Osteen.
Now, huh?
I thought you were going to say Joel Osteen.
Joel Osteen. Yeah. Well, Joel Osteen don't know nothing about being a preacher either. When you think of evil women in history, you think of Rodrigo's daughter, Lucretia Borgia. Lucretia, you don't want to name your daughter Lucretia. The Blood, Sweat, and Tears had a song out, Lucretia make evil, little girl, what's your game? Hard luck and trouble seem to be your claim to fame. And Lucretia Borgia was believed to be a killer, a murderer, that she did the bidding of her father. He actually paid. They call this simony. Simony is where he paid for that office. He bribed men to vote for him to be pope, and he had no principle at all, and he was a Spanish Roman Catholic pope. He is the one who pushed this doctrine of discovery as the pope in 1492 when Columbus was discovering America. He pushed for Columbus to go over here and make claim to this land against the American Indian. If you really want to know something about this, you go to, well, I got a book on this. I read some of it last week. Well, I had it here somewhere. Maybe I put it over here. Oh,
Not eminent domain?
huh?
Is that not eminent domain?
What'd you say?
Eminent domain.
Well, no. The American Indians lived here. They lived here.
Right.
And they were told by the Pope, you go in there and kill everybody that gets in your way. If they'll convert, tell them they can live here, but you have a right to go and kill them anytime you want to. The same thing that America did to the black men, the same thing that we did to the Mexicans. We took Texas, New Mexico, and California from them without their permission. We declared war against them. We got them to attack us after we invaded their land, which was Texas, under James Knox Polk, the president, a Tennessee president, and we took their land. They had what they call Manifest Destiny, which was a nice patriotic name. They just simply renamed the Doctrine of Discovery. We took the land of the American Indian, we drove them west, drove 125,000 of them out of Georgia, said, this is not your land, it's ours. We came in under the Pope's orders, and we're taking the land as Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny meant that the Christianity had a right to take everything all the way to the West Coast. If they'd have gone through with what they call continentalism, we would have taken all of Canada and all of South America. We're just corrupt. That's amazing that they came in and killed all these people. They slaughtered the American Indian. If you want to read a book that's really informative on this, read Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. We slaughtered most of the tribes. No mercy. Just go in, shoot men, women, children, babies. That's what we did to the American Indian. Didn't care whether they liked it or not. I had another book here. And when you listen to the Indian cause, they said they celebrated the fact that they were still alive after all of this. Now that's amazing.
This is still in practice too.
This Doctrine of Discovery is a law that was adopted by America, and it's still on our books. You can treat the American Indian the way you want to treat them. You don't have to consider them. Well, I had another book here, and I misplaced it. I was going to show it to you again. But what's amazing, we think that's terrible. If I can, oh, here it is, here. I preached on this a few years ago, and I'd forgotten preaching on it. And this is a book, Native America Discovered and Conquered. We said, the Pope said, when they came into America, the American Indian wasn't occupying it, they weren't humans. And they had no right to it. So we had the right to come in, lay claim to it, start putting up fences. The American Indian said it belongs to everybody. And this is, I'm going to read a little of what I read last week and then read you something else. How much time do I have, Mike?
12.
Huh?
12 minutes.
12 minutes. The Doctrine of Discovery, they justify their governmental property claims over these territories, over the indigenous inhabitants, with the Doctrine of Discovery. This legal principle was created by religious and ethnocentric ideas of European and Caucasian superiority. Caucasians had superior rights to the land in America. If you're an American Indian, we have a right to kill you on the spot if you don't convert, and God will be happy with this because we're killing the heretics. Over the other cultures, the doctrine provided under established international law that newly arrived Europeans immediately and automatically acquired property rights in native lands and gained governmental, political, and commercial rights over the inhabitants without the knowledge nor consent of the indigenous people. No matter what the American Indian thought, you have no rights, it's ours. We put a flag in here, we claimed it, the Pope said so. We were founded on paganism. That's very pagan. Jefferson knew all about it. I said it last week. That's why he sent Lewis and Clark on that expedition, that world-famous expedition to the Northwest Territory, to Washington State, Oregon, Idaho, so he could make claim to that for the United States and tell the Indians, get out. It's ours. Is that different than Adolf Hitler invading Poland? Is that different than Napoleon invading everywhere, trying to take over the world, or Attila the Hun? Let me ask you something else. Is that any different than Al-Fatah? Remember Al-Fatah? Al-Fatah is an Islamic thing. Wherever they go, if you get into the way, the Pope and the Caliphate, the Pope of Roman Catholicism is the same thing as the Caliphate. The Pope says he gets his office from Peter, and that's not true. And the Caliphate says he gets his office from Muhammad. That is whoever takes over. Whoever takes Muhammad or Ali, his nephew, and if you're a Sunni, you follow Muhammad, and if you are a Shiite, then you follow Ali, and they fight each other. And they say that they can go in anywhere, and if you come up, back in the 6th century, Muhammad started the doctrine of Al-Fatah, and if anyone, as Islam advances, no different than what we did to the American Indian, no different. As Islam advances, anyone who gets into tries to divert Islam from their purpose or their goals, you place yourself immediately in jihad. When 6,000 Jews were killed during 6 million Jews were killed during World War II, Harry Truman sided with the Jews and said, let's make them, this land of Israel will be their land. It'll be their land. And when we did that, the Islamic people had been inhabiting that land for 400 years, and they say, we are disenfranchised, you've taken our land from us, and you've given it to Israel, and we placed ourselves in jihad, and Israel became in jihad, and therefore they say we can go to America, and we can kill the Caucasian Americans just like we said we could go kill the American Indian. It's no different. I've got sense enough to see that. Do you have sense enough to see it? America was built on a racist doctrine. It's really easy to come up after you start America and say, the black man doesn't have any rights. We get to kill him if he's in our way. You don't have a soul, so it don't matter. When you die, you're not going to go to heaven or hell. So what difference does it make? What difference does it make for the Mexicans out there when we took over Texas, New Mexico, and California, and part of Colorado? What difference does it make? They're not humans. They're not Christians. That guy that saw me at the store yesterday, he said, you don't cut no slack for nobody. I said, nobody. I'm not cutting slack for the government because it would sound patriotic to say, God bless America. What? You mean a Roman Catholic state taking over what you want to take over? Wally Perez, future jihad. He'll tell you all about Al-Fatah. He'll tell you how that it was started by Muhammad. You see him once in a while on C-SPAN, or you see him on Fox News, and he'll tell you all about the Middle East. And here's what he says about Al-Fatah. I'd like to read all of it. Do I have any time, Mike?
5 minutes.
The caliphate is the caliph. You'll be watching some movie and it'll say the caliph is coming. Well, that means the man who took the office of Muhammad. He's the head high priest of Islam. That's what a caliphate is. Hence, the caliphate created a unilateral dynamic of moving forward. There is to be no reversal of the geography of the Islamic State. No reversal. Same thing we said about the American Indian. On the contrary, there is only one way open, onward and forward. It sounds like Americans. Thomas Jefferson was one of the men heading up the removal of the American Indian from the lands. So was Andrew Jackson. Most of the early presidents, yes, this is a Christian thing to do, move them west and give them reservations, and later on we'll give them reparations in the form of these casinos. That's what they need, casinos. This doctrine was called Al-Fatah, translated literally as the opening. In simple geopolitical terms, Fatah was the conquest of non-Muslim lands. How about non-Christian lands? Non-Roman Catholic lands. Kill them if they get in the way. We slaughtered the American Indian by the millions. We wiped out some tribes completely. It was the legitimization of the expansion of the state of Islam. It was not called occupation. It was perceived as a divinely authorized march into the land outside the state. That sounds exactly like America, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Invasion has a name in Arabic, ijtiya. Occupation has another, el-tilal. Both have a negative connotation which would invite legitimate reprisal from the conquered peoples. They said, and the Indians, American Indian, wasn't conquered. They wasn't even there. They might as well have been somewhere on the moon. Hence, the inventors of the word fatah were proposing a new term that means practically both invasion and occupation, but without saying it was often connected to the higher aim, such as the service of Allah, religion, and Ummah, which means nation, a connection that both rendered the concept legitimate, made it legitimate to take over somebody's land if you weren't Islam. Made it legitimate to take over the Indians' land if you weren't Christian Catholics. And provided an emotional component to its adherents. To perform fatah in the 7th century was perfectly legitimate in the eyes of the followers. To perform manifest destiny, which was the doctrine of discovery, in the 1400s was perfectly legitimate to the Catholic Church as they sent Columbus to make claim for Ferdinand and Isabella, Roman Catholics. Legitimate in the eyes of the followers of the Caliph, as if the lands of Dar el-Harb were waiting the liberators. Fatah was mubah, M-U-B-A-H, permissible if conducted by the proper authorities, which in those days meant the supreme commander of the believers, the Caliph. Conquest was not a unique characteristic of Islamic expansion or of Arab invasion. It wasn't unique to them. We did it too. That's amazing, isn't it? At different times, many nations simply conquered others and settled their own populations on foreign lands. That is the core of world history. That's what everybody's been doing, and it ain't going to stop. We did the same thing. I've told the story. Me and Mary went out there out to the land of the Sioux Indians, the Lakotas. I talked to one of the chiefs, or one of the guys who was the descendant of Crazy Horse, and he wrote this book right here, Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse was their hero.
He wasn't a chief.
Well, not a chief, but he was their leader, their military leader. He was the guy that fought and led them into battle. They've got a monument out there, Crazy Horse Monument, just south of Rapid City, South Dakota. In Rapid City, you've got the presidents, the Mount Rushmore. This Crazy Horse Monument makes Mount Rushmore look like a little piece of dirt. Crazy Horse is sitting on a horse pointing towards the distance, and Mount Rushmore will fit in his face. The entire mountain will fit in his face, and nobody even hears about Crazy Horse Monument. They don't even want the government to help. They've been working on Crazy Horse Monument for 100 years. The government says, we'll help. They say, no, you won't. We don't want your help. May no wonder. And I talked to the fellow that wrote this book. He said, none of it happened the way you've been told in history books. Like Mike says, Mike Perdue, he said, whoever wins the war gets to write the history. We wrote the history and all of it's a lie. Richard Schenkman says it is. He's a researcher for the Library of Congress. Richard Schenkman's a brilliant man. You'll see him on C-SPAN once in a while saying the things that we've been told in history are not true. We slaughtered the American Indian. We had no conscience whatsoever. The other night, I got to thinking of a movie I saw years ago. It was a horrific movie. It was called Soldier Blue. It was about the slaughter by Custer of one of the Indian tribes. They came in, they said it was the worst visual effects of a movie ever up to that time. And they showed them coming in, the women running naked from these soldiers. I showed one woman's head being cut off. They were being slaughtered in this village, the men, women, and children, because they didn't have any rights. I never forgot the movie. I saw it about 1970. Whoa. They said it was so bad, I think they took it off list to be distributed. Did anybody see that? It was really bad. They didn't want to make Custer look that bad. He was a fool. And I asked this guy, I said, why do you call all this Thieves Road and Thieves Mountain and Thieves River? He said, we named it all after George Custer. He stole our land. After we were given this land, this Indian land, after we were given it as a reservation, Philip Sheridan, the general who was in charge, and I've got some articles about Sheridan. He was a general, head of that northwest area, and he liked Custer. He liked him so much he made him a general when he was 25. I think George Custer was an idiot. He was a jerk. He just would go in and slaughter and steal and thieve. And we sent him in there, Sheridan sent him in there to see if there was gold in the Black Hills after we'd given them the Black Hills. No wonder they came out slaughtering the Caucasians and scalping them. We break into their home after we give it to them. We did the same thing that they're doing to America that the terrorists are doing. They think they have a right in the name of Allah to do this. What's the answer to that? There's not any. They're not going away because the sword, the famine, the pestilence, all of that is nothing but God's judgment because Israel celebrated Christmas under another name 4,000 years ago. I'm out of time, ain't I, Mike? Let's pray. Father, thank you for truth. Lord, I don't even know what to ask anymore. I'm very tired, weary. I pray you'll constantly give us this desire for truth. May we witness daily and care about the sheep. Lord, help us in everything we do. Help the flock to mature. Lord, I'm doing everything I know to do. Help me. Lead us to your elect family. Supply all our need. Fight every battle for us. Give you praise in Christ's name. Amen. If you want to come look at this Native America Discovered and Conquered, it's really super book.
Got it at Goodwill.
Stay there with my dog. I'll bet. Every day.
How you been?
How's your arm doing? How's your arm? It's better. Some days we're not so good, and other days we're good.
What you waiting on?
I didn't see you.
Yeah,
I didn't go walk.
my truck's
But I've got everything now. I can't do it this way, but I can do it this way. Well, I still got
oh, but he didn't. Shut down. I put a new reservoir in, created more pressure in where that, told you about that heater. It's not working. It's not a big deal.
Get a hold of everything.
I ran and all of a sudden it got to a certain degree, the computer shut it off. Because I have no radio, I have no lights, I got no power at all. Shut the engine down before it burned up.
I just hate it.
I have to get it towed back to where I had that engine put in.
No, I mean, you have to get it towed to your house.
Yeah. Sure. $35. Good thing.
My problem I noticed is when
I got no coverage on my engine.
it's that I have a habit.
One good thing, the car without it. It's not a car. Okay, when I come in the wreck and they break my engine, they gonna replace the engine?
Yeah.
So what's the difference if a hose? It doesn't. Well, one of them is course. Well, why I have no coverage. But in case it gets too late. But it's too late now. It's past. Boy, past. We're burned.
That's ridiculous.
Because I've already got hit in the rear end.
And so I'm not going so much.
I got hit in the rear end coming up Murfreesboro Road. Car hit me in the rear end, but it damaged the car.
Separate bags. We don't eat it. It don't matter. I mean, I can eat like that.
Stay there for a while.
I get full. My big fuss.
No lights. No lights. Gas, but it's come down. Gas has come down. I got all
I don't like to eat it.
I got all my.
I eat it. Yeah,
Go to a
it's over. I ain't got a mess with
pawn shop.
it. No big clean up. You don't care.
That was mom's car.
Right. What happened to her car?
Takes your body, it takes the body a long time to digest. I don't eat well, right here, I didn't early, like 11 That's why I eat it early. I try not to plus it's and that's enough. It was a great decision.
She said she's sweet. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Good, doing good. I can tell
I've got a guy.
I want to live that. I just say you got to well, there's a lot of
I don't know if you guys knew this or not. A while back I fixed that. Blue down? Well, that was the same day I brought those chairs over there. Where'd you put those chairs out? In the bedroom. They work out? Yeah.
You know where those windows are?
Yeah.
Plenty of room. So I don't want to.
Older upholstery.
Like that car is in. And there's got a lot of I like them because they're down back.
Yeah.
There's some of them covered in leather. Same thing.